The lightning cracked so close that Miranda Thorne could taste metal on her tongue. And in that blinding flash, she realized with a sinking dread that nothing around her looked familiar anymore. She had been following the trail from Denver back to her aunt's ranch, just outside the city limits, when the spring storm rolled in from the mountains with a fury she had never witnessed before. The year was 1878, and Miranda had only arrived in Colorado 3 weeks prior from Boston, sent west by her parents who hoped the dry mountain air would cure her persistent cough and the melancholy that had settled over her after her younger brother's death from scarlet fever. At 22 years old, she was supposed to be married by now, settled with children. But grief had made her withdrawn and pale, and her parents feared for her future. The storm had seemed distant when she left town that afternoon, just dark clouds gathering over the Rockies, but the weather in Colorado moved fast and turned vicious without warning. Within 15 minutes, the world had transformed into a howling nightmare of rain and hail, the drops so large they stung through her wool traveling dress. Her horse, a gentle mare named Clementine that her aunt had lent her for the journey, had spooked at a particularly violent crack of thunder and bolted off the main road into the scrubland. Miranda had managed to stay in the saddle, but in the chaos of the storm and her inexperience with Western riding, she had lost all sense of direction. When Clementine finally calmed enough to slow to a nervous trot, Miranda looked around desperately for any landmark she recognized. Nothing. Just endless rolling hills dotted with sage and juniper, all of it obscured by sheets of rain that turned the afternoon into premature twilight. She urged Clementine forward, trying to retrace their path, but the rain had already washed away any tracks. The temperature was dropping rapidly as the sun disappeared completely behind the storm clouds, and Miranda realized with growing panic that she was thoroughly lost. Her light traveling cloak was soaked through, offering no protection against the cold rain that now mixed with sleet. She had no supplies, no food, no blankets. She had only meant to be gone for a few hours to visit the general store in Denver. Another hour passed as Miranda wandered through the storm, calling out occasionally in the vain hope that someone might hear her. Her voice was swept away by the wind before it could carry more than a few feet. Clementine stumbled on the increasingly muddy ground, and Miranda made the decision to dismount and lead the horse on foot, afraid they would both go down if the mare lost her footing completely. The sleet turned to rain again, then back to sleet, and Miranda's teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. Her fingers were numb where they gripped the reins, and her feet squelched in her leather boots with each step. She knew she should find shelter, but there was nothing out here except low shrubs and the occasional boulder. No caves, no overhangs, no abandoned buildings, just empty land stretching in every direction. When full darkness fell, Miranda was shaking so violently that she could barely walk. She had tied Clementine to a sturdy juniper and huddled against the leeward side of a large rock formation, trying to use her own body to create some warmth, but it was useless. The wind found every gap in her clothing, and the wet fabric leached away whatever heat she generated. Her thoughts began to slow and muddle. She found herself thinking about Boston, about her mother's parlor with its fireplace and thick carpets. She thought about her brother Thomas and wondered if she would see him soon. That was when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. At first she thought she was imagining it, that her mind was playing tricks as hypothermia set in. But then she heard a man's voice calling out, low and steady, cutting through the storm. "Anyone out here? Hello." Miranda tried to answer, but her jaw was clenched so tight from shivering that she could barely form words. She managed a weak cry that was more of a moan, but somehow, impossibly, the rider heard her. The hoofbeats came closer, and then a dark shape loomed out of the rain. A man on horseback, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a heavy oilskin duster that shed water like duck feathers. He swung down from his horse with practiced ease and was at her side in seconds. "Jesus Christ, madam, you are frozen half to death," he said. his voice rough with concern. He pulled off his duster without hesitation and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body and smelled of leather and smoke and something else, something earthy and masculine that cut through Miranda's confusion. "I got lost," she managed through chattering teeth. "The storm." I know. Can you stand? We need to get you to shelter right now." His hands were on her arms, strong and steady, and even through her layers of wet clothing she could feel the heat radiating from him. Miranda tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Without a word, the cowboy caught her and lifted her into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. He carried her to his horse, a tall, dark gelding that stood patient in the storm and somehow managed to mount while still holding her. He settled her in front of him, wrapped his arms around her to hold the reins, and urged his horse forward into the darkness. "My horse," Miranda mumbled against his chest. "Clementine." "I will come back for her at first light," he said. "Right now I need to get you warm or you are going to die." "My camp is not far." Miranda wanted to protest, to insist that he retrieve Clementine now, but she could not form the words. The cold had seeped so deep into her bones that she could not stop shaking. She found herself pressing closer to the cowboy's warmth, her cheek against his solid chest, and she felt rather than heard the rumble of his voice as he spoke soothingly to his horse. The ride could have been minutes or hours. Miranda drifted in and out of awareness, conscious only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the strong arms holding her secure. At some point the rain lessened, and then they were stopping. The cowboy dismounted and lifted her down, carrying her toward a dark shape that resolved into a small line shack, one of the rough shelters that ranchers built throughout their range for cowboys tending cattle far from the main ranch. He kicked the door open and brought her inside, laying her carefully on a narrow cot against one wall. Miranda heard the scrape of a match, and then lamplight flared, revealing a single room with rough plank walls, a small stove, and not much else. The cowboy worked quickly, building up the fire in the stove with practiced efficiency. Soon, blessed heat began to radiate through the small space. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said, turning to face her. In the lamplight, Miranda got her first good look at her rescuer. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar and eyes that were somewhere between blue and gray. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw shadowed with a few days' worth of stubble. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way that was utterly foreign to Miranda's Boston experience. "I cannot," she whispered, mortified at the suggestion even as she shook with cold. "Madam, I mean no disrespect, but if you stay in those wet things, you are going to catch pneumonia and die. I have some dry clothes you can wear. I will turn my back and tend to my horse and you change." "Can you do that?" Miranda nodded, though she was not certain she had the strength or coordination to manage it. The cowboy pulled a bundle from a pack in the corner and set it on the cot beside her, then turned his back and went outside, pulling the door closed behind him. With trembling, numb fingers, Miranda struggled with the buttons of her dress. They were small and slippery, and her hands refused to cooperate. She managed to get her cloak off and her dress unbuttoned, but when she tried to pull it over her head, the wet fabric clung stubbornly. She was crying from frustration and cold when the door opened again and the cowboy stepped back inside, carefully keeping his eyes averted. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "I cannot manage the buttons." "It is all right," he said quietly. He crossed to the cot and knelt beside it, and his hands, rough and calloused but surprisingly gentle, helped her work the dress over her head. He kept his eyes firmly on his work, treating her with the same matter-of-fact care he might show an injured animal. He helped her out of her soaked petticoats and corset, and when she sat in nothing but her thin chemise, still damp and clinging to her skin, he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Can you manage the rest?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Miranda nodded, not trusting her voice. He turned away again, busying himself with the stove, and she peeled off the last of her wet undergarments and pulled on the dry clothes he had provided. They were men's clothes of coarse, rough cotton pants and a flannel shirt that hung huge on her frame, but they were dry and soft from wear, and she had never been more grateful for anything in her life. "I am decent," she said softly. He turned and nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Now sit close to the stove, and I will make you something hot to drink." He produced a battered coffee pot and filled it with water from a canteen, setting it on the stove to heat. From his saddlebags, he pulled strips of dried beef and some hardtack biscuits, laying them out on a tin plate. "It is not fancy, but it will help warm you from the inside," he said, handing her the plate. "I am Adam Zimmerman, by the way. I work for the Triple Creek Ranch about 10 miles northwest of Denver." "Miranda Thorne," she said, accepting the food with shaking hands. "I am staying with my aunt, Catherine Thorne, at her ranch outside Denver. I went to town this afternoon and the storm caught me on the way back." "You are new to Colorado, then," Adam said. It was not quite a question. "Is it so obvious?" Miranda asked, managing a weak smile. "No one who grew up here would have gotten caught out in a spring storm without supplies," he said, but his tone was kind, not judgmental. "Those storms come up fast from the mountains. You need to watch the sky and head for shelter at the first sign of clouds building." "I will remember that," Miranda said. The coffee was ready and Adam poured her a cup, thick and black and probably strong enough to strip paint. She wrapped her hands around the tin cup, savoring the warmth, and took a careful sip. It was bitter and harsh, but it was hot, and she felt it spreading warmth through her chest. "How did you find me?" she asked. "I did not think anyone else was out in this. I was checking on the lined shacks before the storm hit, making sure they were stocked and in good repair. This was my last stop, and I was planning to wait out the weather here. I heard your horse whinny when I was about a quarter-mile away. Horses can hear each other from quite a distance. I figured someone was in trouble, so I went looking." "You saved my life," Miranda said, the reality of it hitting her suddenly. If Adam had not heard Clementine, if he had not gone searching, she would have frozen to death against that rock. "Just did what anyone would do," Adam said, but he looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. He pulled the room's single chair closer to the stove and sat down, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "You should eat something. Get your strength back." Miranda nibbled at the dried beef, which was salty and tough but not unpleasant. As the warmth from the stove and the hot coffee seeped into her body, the violent shivering began to ease. She found herself studying Adam Zimmerman in the flickering lamplight. He had removed his hat, revealing dark hair that was slightly damp at the temples. His profile was strong and clean, and there was a quiet competence about him, a sense that this was a man who knew how to handle himself in any situation. "Do you live out here?" she asked. "At the ranch." "Yes, madam. I have been working for Triple Creek for 3 years now. Before that, I worked cattle drives up from Texas, but I got tired of the traveling and wanted to settle somewhere. Colorado suits me." "Where are you from originally?" "Kansas. Little town called Abilene. My father was a farmer, but I never took to it. Too much standing in one place, waiting for things to grow. I like working with cattle, being on horseback, moving around." "Do you have family back in Kansas?" Adam's expression shuddered slightly. "My parents both passed some years back, cholera. I have a sister in Missouri, married with 3 children. I see her when I can." "I am sorry about your parents," Miranda said softly. "It is the way of things," Adam said. "Sickness takes who it takes." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Miranda felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the stove. "What about you? What brought you all the way from Boston to Colorado?" Miranda wrapped her hands tighter around the coffee cup. "My brother died last winter, scarlet fever. He was only 15. I took it very hard, and my parents thought a change of scenery might help. My aunt has been out here for 20 years, since she married my uncle. He passed a few years ago, but she kept the ranch running. She thought the mountain air and the open space might be good for me." "Has it helped?" Adam asked, his voice gentle. "I do not know yet," Miranda admitted. "I have only been here a few weeks, Everything is so different from Boston, so much space and the mountains and the way the sky seems to go on forever. It is overwhelming sometimes. It can be, Adam agreed. But there is a freedom to it too. Room to breathe, room to be yourself without everyone in town knowing your business. Do you like it? The solitude? Most days. There are times when it would be nice to have someone to talk to, someone to share the sunsets with. But I have the other hands at the ranch, and I get into Denver when I need to see a friendly face. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease. The hammering rain had settled into a steady patter, and the wind had lost its vicious edge. Adam stood and checked the stove, adding another piece of wood. "You should rest," he said. "It is going to be a long night, and you need sleep to recover from the cold." "Where will you sleep?" Miranda asked, looking around the small cabin. There was only the one cot. "I will be fine in the chair. I have slept in worse places." "I cannot take your bed," Miranda protested. "It is not my bed, it is the ranch's bed, and you are the one who nearly froze to death." "Please, madam, rest." Miranda was too exhausted to argue further. She lay down on the narrow cot, and Adam pulled a thick wool blanket over her, tucking it around her shoulders with the same gentle care he had shown earlier. She closed her eyes, certain she would not be able to sleep with a strange man in the room, but the warmth and exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. She woke once in the night and saw Adam still sitting in the chair, his head tipped back against the wall, eyes closed. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, making him look younger and more vulnerable. Miranda felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of feeling she had not experienced in a very long time. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more, and let sleep claim her again. When she woke the second time, pale gray light was filtering through the cabin's single small window. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. Adam was already awake, boiling coffee and laying out more of the dried beef for breakfast. "Good morning," he said when he noticed her stirring. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," Miranda said, sitting up. It was true. The warmth and rest had done wonders. She was stiff and sore, but the bone-deep cold was gone. "Thank you for everything. You are welcome." "I am going to go fetch your horse now that it is light. Will you be all right here alone for a bit?" "Yes, of course." Adam nodded and headed out. Miranda stood and stretched, looking down at the oversized clothes she wore. Her own things were draped over a line Adam must have strung up near the stove at some point during the night, but they were still damp. She poured herself a cup of coffee and went to the door, opening it to look out at the morning. The world sparkled with moisture, every surface beaded with drops that caught the rising sun. The air smelled clean and fresh, with the sharp green scent of wet sage. In the distance, Miranda could see the mountains, their peaks dusted with fresh snow from the storm. It was breathtakingly beautiful in a way that Boston never was, wild and untamed and honest. She heard hoofbeats and turned to see Adam riding back, leading Clementine behind him. The mare looked no worse for wear, and she nickered when she saw Miranda. "She was right where you left her," Adam said, dismounting. "A little wet and annoyed, but no harm done." "Good girl," Miranda said, going to stroke Clementine's nose. The horse butted her head against Miranda's shoulder affectionately. "I need to get you back to your aunt's place," Adam said. "She is probably worried sick. Do you know the way from here?" "No," Miranda admitted. "I have no idea where we are. We are about 6 miles southwest of town. Your aunt's ranch is northeast of Denver, correct? The old Harrison place?" "Yes, that is right." "It is going to take us a few hours to get there. Your clothes are not dry yet. You can ride in what you are wearing, and I will bring your things along. You can return my clothes next time you are in town." "I hate to be such a bother," Miranda said. "You are not a bother," Adam said firmly. "Come on, let us get you home." They rode out together, Adam leading the way on his gelding with Clementine following behind carrying Miranda. The morning was cool but pleasant after the storm, and Miranda found herself enjoying the ride despite her lingering soreness. Adam pointed out landmarks as they went, teaching her how to orient herself by the shape of the mountains and the position of the sun. That peak there, the one that looks like a tooth, that is Castle Rock, he said. If you can see that, you know you are south of Denver. And see how the Front Range runs north-south. As long as you keep the mountains on your left when you are heading south or your right when heading north, you cannot get too lost. Miranda listened carefully, committing the information to memory. She never wanted to be as helpless as she had been yesterday. Lost and freezing in the storm, they talked as they rode, the conversation flowing easily now that the urgency of the night before had passed. Adam told her about working cattle, about the challenges of the Colorado winters and the beauty of spring calving season. Miranda told him about Boston, about the cobblestone streets and the harbor and the way the city felt both exciting and suffocating at the same time. Do you miss it? Adam asked. Parts of it, Miranda said honestly. I miss my parents and my friends, I miss the theater and the museums, but I do not miss the expectations, the constant sense that I was supposed to be someone I was not. Here I can just be myself. Who are you then? Adam asked, glancing back at her with a slight smile. Miranda considered the question seriously. I am still figuring that out. When they finally reached her aunt's ranch, a modest spread with a 2-story house and several outbuildings, Catherine Thorne came running out of the house, her face pale with fear that transformed instantly to relief when she saw Miranda. "Oh, thank God," she cried, pulling Miranda down from the horse and into a fierce embrace. "I have been out of my mind. When you did not come home last night and the storm hit, I thought the worst. I was about to ride into town and organize a search party." "I am so sorry, Aunt Catherine," Miranda said, hugging her back. "I got lost in the storm. If it were not for Mr. Zimmerman, I would have frozen to death." Catherine turned to Adam, who had dismounted and stood holding his hat respectfully. "How can I ever thank you?" she asked. "No thanks necessary, madam," Adam said. "I am just glad I found her in time. Please come inside. Let me give you breakfast, or at least more coffee. It is the least I can do." Adam hesitated, then nodded. "That would be kind, thank you." They went inside, and Catherine bustled about making a proper breakfast of eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits, far better than the trail food they had been eating. Miranda excused herself to change into dry clothes of her own, and when she came back downstairs in a simple day dress of blue calico, she caught Adam looking at her with an expression that made her heart skip. Over breakfast, Catherine asked Adam about the ranch where he worked and the storm and a dozen other things, her natural friendliness putting everyone at ease. But Miranda noticed that Adam's eyes kept returning to her, and every time their gazes met, she felt that same flutter in her chest. When the meal was finished, Adam stood to leave. "I should get back to the ranch. I am sure there is work piling up." "Of course," Catherine said. "Thank you again, Mr. Zimmerman. You will always be welcome at this house." Miranda walked him out to where his horse waited. In the bright morning sun, he looked even more handsome than he had in the lamplight, and Miranda found herself reluctant to see him go. "I will wash your clothes and bring them to town," she said. "Perhaps next week." "There is no rush," Adam said. "But if you happen to be in Denver on Saturday, I usually stop by the general store around midday. We could meet there." "I will be there," Miranda said, more quickly than she probably should have. Adam's smile widened. "Saturday, then," he said. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat to her, and rode away. Miranda stood watching until he disappeared from sight. "Well," Catherine said from behind her, making Miranda jump. She had not heard her aunt come out. "He seems like a fine young man." "He saved my life," Miranda said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I noticed the way he looked at you," Catherine said, her eyes twinkling, "and the way you looked at him. Aunt Catherine, I just met him. Sometimes that is all it takes. I knew I loved your uncle 5 minutes after meeting him." She put her arm around Miranda's shoulders. "I am not saying you should marry the man tomorrow. I am just saying keep an open mind. The heart knows things the head takes longer to figure out." The days until Saturday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Miranda helped her aunt with the endless work of running the ranch, feeding chickens, tending the vegetable garden, mending fences, and cooking meals. The work was hard and left her exhausted at the end of each day, but she found she enjoyed it more than she had expected. There was something satisfying about physical labor, about seeing the direct results of her efforts. But through it all, she found her thoughts returning again and again to Adam Zimmerman. She remembered the gentle strength of his hands, the quiet competence with which he had handled the emergency, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She told herself she was being foolish, that she barely knew him, but her heart refused to listen to reason. On Saturday morning, she dressed with extra care in her best day dress, a soft green cotton that her mother had insisted she pack. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up in a neat coil, then studied herself critically in the mirror. The weeks in Colorado had already begun to change her. There was color in her cheeks from the sun and wind, and some of the shadows had faded from her eyes. "You look lovely," Catherine said approvingly when Miranda came downstairs. "Should I come with you to town, or would you prefer to meet your cowboy alone?" "He is not my cowboy," Miranda protested, but she could not help smiling. "And I can manage alone, thank you." "I promise to pay attention and not get lost this time." "The sky is clear and should stay that way," Catherine said, "but take supplies anyway just in case. Canteen, blanket, some food, and be back before dark." Miranda promised and set out on Clementine, Adam's neatly folded and laundered clothes in her saddlebags. The ride to Denver was pleasant, the trail easy to follow in daylight, and she arrived in town with time to spare. Denver in 1878 was a growing city. No longer the rough mining camp it had been 15 years earlier, but not yet the metropolis it would become. The streets were wide and dusty, lined with false-fronted buildings housing saloons, shops, hotels, and businesses of all kinds. Miranda tied Clementine outside the general store and went inside, the bell over the door jingling to announce her arrival. The store was dim and cool after the bright sunlight, crowded with goods of every description. Barrels of flour and sugar lined one wall, while shelves held everything from fabric to ammunition to canned goods. She was examining a display of ribbons when the bell jingled again, and she heard Adam's voice. "Morning, Mrs. Fletcher. Fine day, is it not?" Miranda turned to see him talking to the proprietor, an older woman with gray hair and sharp, kind eyes. He had not seen Miranda yet, and she took the opportunity to observe him unnoticed. He wore clean clothes, a blue work shirt and dark trousers, and his dark hair was still damp, as if he had recently washed. Her heart did a little skip in her chest. Then he turned and saw her, and his whole face lit up with a smile that made her feel warm all over. "Miss Thorne," he said, crossing to her in a few long strides. "You came." "I promised I would," she said, returning his smile. "I have your clothes, they are on my horse. Let us step outside and you can give them to me, and then perhaps I could buy you lunch. There is a decent restaurant just down the street." "I would like that very much," Miranda said. They retrieved the clothes from her saddlebags, and Adam stowed them on his own horse, then offered her his arm. Miranda took it, acutely aware of the strength of the muscles beneath his sleeve, and they walked together down the board sidewalk to a small restaurant called the Denver Dining Room. Over plates of roast beef and potatoes, they talked for hours. Adam told her more about his work, about the satisfaction of delivering a healthy calf or breaking a young horse to saddle. Miranda told him about her life in Boston, about her brother Thomas, and how much she missed him, about her fear that she would never feel truly happy again. "Grief is like that," Adam said quietly. "After my parents died, I felt hollow for months, like there was a hole inside me that nothing could fill. But slowly, bit by bit, it got easier. The hole is still there, but I learned to live around it. And sometimes, when I am watching the sunrise over the mountains or helping a newborn calf stand for the first time, I feel something close to joy. It comes back, Miss Thorne. Maybe not the same as it was before, but it comes back." Miranda felt tears prick her eyes. No one in Boston had talked to her like this, with such honest understanding. They had all offered platitudes and told her to be strong, to have faith, to move on. But Adam understood that grief was not something you moved on from. It was something you carried, something that became part of who you were. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding." "I think we understand each other," Adam said, and the look in his eyes made Miranda's breath catch. They walked together after lunch, wandering through the town, and Adam introduced her to people he knew, the blacksmith and the saloon owner and the woman who ran the boarding house. Everyone seemed to like and respect him, and Miranda found herself seeing him through their eyes, this steady, reliable man who kept his word and helped his neighbors. When the afternoon began to fade toward evening, Adam walked her back to where Clementine waited. "I suppose you need to head back," he said, and there was reluctance in his voice. "Yes, I promised my aunt I would be home before dark. Would you like to do this again, next Saturday, perhaps?" "I would like that very much," Miranda said. "There is a dance next Saturday night at the community hall. Would you allow me to escort you?" Miranda's heart soared. "Yes, I would be honored." Adam helped her mount, his hands steady on her waist, and for a moment they stood close together, his face tilted up to hers. Miranda felt the strongest urge to lean down and kiss him, but propriety held her back. "Saturday, then," Adam said, stepping back reluctantly. "Saturday," Miranda agreed and rode away, turning in the saddle to wave when she reached the edge of town. Adam waved back, standing in the street watching her go. The week passed in a haze of anticipation. Catherine helped Miranda let out the seams of the nicest dress she had brought from Boston, a deep blue silk that had been too tight across the bust, but now fit perfectly. They curled her hair with hot irons and debated whether she should wear it up or down. "Down," Catherine decided. "It makes you look younger and more romantic, and this young man of yours seems like the romantic type." When Saturday arrived, Miranda was ready hours too early, pacing the parlor in her blue silk dress and nervousness. Adam arrived at 6 o'clock exactly, driving a small buggy borrowed from the ranch, and when Miranda opened the door, the look on his face made all her anxiety vanish. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." He did. He wore a black suit that was slightly worn but well kept, with a white shirt and a string tie. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw. Catherine invited him in for a moment, offering refreshments, but Adam politely declined, saying they should get to town before the dance started. He helped Miranda into the buggy with courtly care, and they set off into the evening. The community hall was already crowded when they arrived, filled with ranchers and townspeople dressed in their best clothes. A local band was setting up in one corner, tuning fiddles and guitars, and long tables along one wall held food and punch brought by the attendees. Adam introduced Miranda to what felt like half the county, and everyone was welcoming and friendly. Several women her age immediately swept her into conversation, asking about Boston and how she was settling in and whether she was finding Colorado to her liking. Miranda found herself laughing and chatting easily, the social skills learned in Boston serving her well even in this very different setting. When the music started, Adam claimed her for the first dance. He was a good dancer, leading her confidently through a lively reel, and Miranda felt herself relax into the music and the movement. They danced 3 dances together before Adam reluctantly released her to other partners, mindful of propriety. Miranda danced with young ranchers and older farmers and even the banker from town, but her eyes kept finding Adam across the room. Every time their gazes met, he smiled at her, and she felt that now familiar warmth spreading through her chest. At the intermission, Adam brought her a cup of punch and they stepped outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead without the competing light of a big city. "Are you having a good time?" Adam asked. "A wonderful time," Miranda said honestly. "I have not felt this happy in months." "Good. I want you to be happy, Miranda." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool air. "I want you to be happy too, Adam." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking up at the stars. Then Adam said quietly, "I know we have not known each other long, just 2 weeks, but I feel like I have known you much longer, like I have been waiting to meet you." Miranda turned to face him, her heart pounding. "I feel the same way." "I am just a cowboy," Adam said, and there was vulnerability in his voice. "I do not have much to offer. I have a little savings, and someday I hope to have my own place, but right now I am just a ranch hand." "You come from a fine family back east with education and refinement. I would understand if you did not want to encourage something between us." "Adam Zimmerman, you saved my life," Miranda said firmly. "You are kind and brave and hardworking. You understand me in a way no one else ever has." "I do not care that you are a ranch hand. I care that you are a good man." The smile that broke across Adam's face was like sunrise. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid, and Miranda laced her fingers through his. "May I court you properly?" Adam asked. "Call on you at your aunt's ranch, take you to church, spend time getting to know you better?" "Yes," Miranda said. "Yes, I would like that very much." They went back inside hand in hand, and when the music started again, Adam kept her for the rest of the evening, propriety be damned. They danced until the band packed up and the lamps were dimmed, and then he drove her home through the starlit night, their shoulders touching in the narrow buggy seat. At her aunt's door, he kissed her hand like a gentleman, but his eyes held promises of more to come. "May I see you tomorrow?" "After church, please," Miranda said. "Then I will be here at 10 to drive you and your aunt to services." True to his word, Adam arrived the next morning in his borrowed buggy, and they attended the small church in Denver together. Afterward, Catherine tactfully found reasons to visit with friends, leaving Adam and Miranda to walk together through the town. This became their pattern over the following weeks. Adam would call on Miranda at her aunt's ranch, helping with chores and repairs, earning Catherine's approval with his willing hands and respectful manner. On Saturdays, they would go into town together, attending dances or church socials or simply walking and talking for hours. On Sundays after church, they would often pack a picnic and ride out to some beautiful spot, where they would spend the afternoon talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, falling deeper in love. Adam taught Miranda to really ride, not the formal English style she had learned in Boston, but the practical Western way, teaching her to handle Clementine with confidence and read the land around her. He showed her how to watch for weather, how to track animals, how to find water in dry country. Miranda bloomed under his attention, growing stronger and more confident with each passing week, and Miranda taught Adam too, though he might not have recognized it as teaching. She read to him in the evenings from the books she had brought from Boston, introducing him to poetry and literature he had never encountered. She told him about art and music and theater, painting pictures with her words of a world he had never seen. And slowly, Adam began to believe that he might deserve this refined, educated woman, that he had something to offer beyond just survival skills and hard work. 2 months after the night of the storm, on a warm June evening, Adam asked Catherine for permission to marry her niece. Catherine gave her blessing with tears in her eyes, saying she had never seen Miranda so happy, so alive. That evening, Adam and Miranda rode out to a high meadow filled with wildflowers, the mountains purple and gold in the setting sun. Adam helped Miranda down from her horse and then knelt in the grass, taking her hands in his. "Miranda Thorne, I know I do not have much to offer you," he began. "Adam, do not," Miranda interrupted. "You have everything to offer. You are everything I want." He smiled at that, his eyes bright. "I love you, Miranda. I think I have loved you since I found you shivering in that storm and you looked at me like I was the answer to a prayer. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, keeping you safe, building a future together. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Miranda said, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, Adam, I love you. Yes." He kissed her then properly, his arms tight around her and his mouth warm and seeking on hers. Miranda melted into him, giving herself over to the kiss, to the rightness of being in his arms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I will do everything I can to make you happy," he promised. "You already do," Miranda said. They were married 6 weeks later in late July at the church in Denver. Miranda wore her mother's wedding dress, which Catherine had kept stored in tissue paper for years, and Adam wore a new suit ordered special from the tailor. Catherine cried happy tears, and half the county turned out to celebrate with them. The Triple Creek Ranch gave Adam a week off for a honeymoon, and he took Miranda up into the mountains, to a small cabin near a lake that reflected the peaks like a mirror. They spent a week alone together, learning each other, making love in the big bed by the stone fireplace, swimming in the cold lake, taking long walks through alpine meadows carpeted with flowers. Miranda had been nervous about the physical side of marriage, but Adam was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when nervousness gave way to pleasure, Miranda discovered a passion she had not known she possessed, a hunger for her husband that left them both breathless and laughing and utterly satisfied. When they returned to civilization, they moved into a small cabin on Triple Creek Ranch land, provided as part of Adam's wages. It was just 2 rooms, rough and simple, but Miranda made it into a home with curtains sewn from flour sacks and wildflowers in jars on the table. Adam's boss, impressed with his work and his new sense of purpose, raised his wages and hinted that someday, if Adam kept working hard, there might be an opportunity to lease some ranch land and start building his own herd. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The cabin was cold in winter and hot in summer. Money was tight, and they had to be careful with every penny. Miranda struggled with the isolation sometimes, missing her family in Boston, and Adam worried constantly about providing for his wife. But through it all, their love deepened and strengthened. They learned to work as a team, to support each other through hard times, to celebrate small victories together. In the spring of 1879, Miranda discovered she was pregnant. Adam was overjoyed, immediately becoming overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Miranda, amused and touched by his concern, had to remind him that ranch women worked right up until they went into labor, and she had no intention of spending 6 months as an invalid. Their son was born in November, during the first snowfall of the season. Catherine came to help with the birth, along with a midwife from town, and after a long labor, Miranda delivered a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. They named him Thomas after Miranda's brother, and when Adam held his son for the first time, Miranda saw tears in his eyes. "He is perfect," Adam whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with surprising gentleness. "You are perfect. I am the luckiest man alive." Motherhood transformed Miranda in ways she had not expected. The melancholy that had plagued her since her brother's death finally lifted completely, replaced by a fierce joy and protectiveness for this new little life. She discovered reserves of strength and patience she had not known she possessed, managing the endless demands of a newborn while still keeping the household running. Adam was a devoted father, taking Thomas from Miranda whenever he could to give her a chance to rest. He would walk the cabin floor at night with a crying baby, singing softly or just talking, his deep voice soothing both child and mother. Watching him with their son, Miranda fell even more deeply in love with her husband. When Thomas was 6 months old, Adam's boss called him in for a conversation. The ranch was expanding, buying up adjacent land, and they needed someone to manage a line camp year-round in the northern section, tending a permanent herd. It would mean more responsibility but also more pay, and after a few years of proving himself, Adam would have the option to lease land and cattle and start building his own operation. Adam talked it over with Miranda that night, worried about moving her even farther from town to an even more isolated location. But Miranda's eyes lit up at the opportunity. "This is what you have been working toward," she said. "A chance to build something of our own. We can do this, Adam. Together, we can do anything." They moved to the line camp in early summer, a better cabin than their first, with 3 rooms and a covered porch. It sat in a high valley with good grass and water, surrounded by rolling hills. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and town was a 2-hour ride, but to Miranda and Adam it felt like paradise. This was their land, or would be someday, their future taking shape. They worked together to build up the herd, to improve the cabin and outbuildings, to make a life in this beautiful, isolated place. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler, helping his father feed the chickens and playing in the dirt while Miranda tended her garden. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the mountains, Thomas falling asleep in his father's arms. In the summer of 1881, their daughter was born, a tiny girl they named Catherine after Miranda's aunt. She was quieter than Thomas had been, with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue-gray eyes, and Adam doted on her shamelessly. Thomas, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. Miranda's parents came to visit when Catherine was 3 months old, their first trip west. Miranda had been nervous about seeing them, afraid they would disapprove of her rustic life, but instead they were amazed and proud. Her mother was impressed by how capable Miranda had become, and her father was won over by Adam's quiet competence and obvious devotion to his family. "You have built a good life here," her father said before they left. "Your brother would have been proud of you, Miranda. I know I am." Those words meant more to Miranda than she could express, a final blessing on the new life she had created so far from the world she had been raised in. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas started helping his father with the cattle in earnest when he was 5, already showing a natural gift with animals. Catherine was more bookish, content to sit with her mother and learn her letters while Miranda taught her to read. In 1883, another son arrived, Andrew, and 2 years later, a second daughter, Mary. The cabin grew with the family, Adam adding rooms with the help of neighboring ranchers. Miranda planted fruit trees and expanded her garden until they were nearly self-sufficient in vegetables and had enough to sell surplus in town. The herd grew year by year, and in 1885, when Thomas was 6 years old, Adam was finally offered the lease he had been working toward. They now had 500 acres and 100 head of cattle, all their own. To celebrate, Adam took Miranda to Denver for a real honeymoon, their first time away from the children since Thomas was born. Catherine came to stay with the little ones, and for 3 days, Miranda and Adam lived like wealthy people, staying in a hotel, eating in restaurants, attending a theater performance. But they were both glad to get back to the ranch, to their children and their animals and the life they had built. "I do not need fancy things," Miranda said as they drove home in the wagon they now owned. "I have everything I need right here." "Me too," Adam said, reaching over to take her hand. "I found you shivering in a storm and you gave me a whole world." The children grew strong and capable, helping with the ranch work as soon as they were old enough. Thomas was serious and hardworking like his father, already talking about expanding the herd when he was grown. Catherine was clever and thoughtful, her nose always in a book when she was not helping her mother. Andrew was the adventurous one, always exploring, always into something, keeping his parents on their toes. And little Mary was pure sunshine, cheerful and friendly and beloved by everyone. Catherine's aunt passed peacefully in her sleep in 1888, leaving her ranch to Miranda. The property adjoined the land Adam was leasing, effectively doubling their operation overnight. It was bittersweet, grieving the woman who had been so kind to them while also recognizing the opportunity her generosity provided. They moved into the bigger house, and Adam hired 2 hands to help manage the expanded herd. The ranch prospered under their management. Adam had a gift for reading the market, knowing when to sell and when to hold back. Miranda managed the finances with the education she had received in Boston, keeping careful accounts and making shrewd investments. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide well for their children and put money aside for the future. In 1890, when Miranda was 34 and Adam was 37, their last child was born, another son they named Robert. Thomas was 11 now, Catherine 9, Andrew 7, and Mary 5, and they all adored their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him. "Our quiver is full," Adam joked, and Miranda laughed and agreed. 6 children were plenty, each one a blessing, each one proof of the love that had started on a stormy night 12 years earlier. As the children grew, the house filled with noise and laughter and sometimes arguments, but always, always with love. Miranda taught all of them to read and write, using the books she had brought from Boston and new ones ordered from catalogs. Adam taught them to ride and rope and read the weather. Together, they raised children who were capable and confident, equally at home with a book or a branding iron. Thomas grew tall and strong, his father's son in every way. At 17, he was already helping make major decisions about the ranch, and Adam was grooming him to eventually take over the operation. Catherine surprised everyone by announcing at 15 that she wanted to be a teacher, and Miranda and Adam scraped together the money to send her to the teaching college in Denver, bursting with pride when she graduated 2 years later. Andrew had his father's way with horses and started a side business breaking and training mounts for other ranchers. Mary, sweet and social, was the heart of the family, the one who remembered everyone's birthday and made sure they all gathered for Sunday dinners. And young Robert, even at 5 years old, showed signs of being the smartest of them all, asking questions about everything and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. In the spring of 1895, 17 years after the night of the storm, Miranda and Adam stood on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. The children were all inside, the older ones helping the younger with evening chores and homework. From the barn came the sound of Andrew singing as he fed the horses. The smell of bread baking drifted from the kitchen where Mary was helping prepare tomorrow's lunch. You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had stayed in Boston? Adam asked, his arm around Miranda's waist. Miranda leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Sometimes. I probably would have married some banker or lawyer my parents approved of, lived in a proper house, gone to proper parties, raised proper children who never got dirty. Would you have been happy? No, Miranda said without hesitation. I would have been comfortable, maybe, respectable, but not happy, not like this. I think about that storm sometimes, Adam admitted, about how I almost did not go looking when I heard your horse. I was cold and wet and wanted to get inside, but something made me go, some instinct that told me someone needed help. Fate, Miranda said softly. It was fate. That storm brought me to you. Best storm of my life, Adam said and kissed the top of her head. They stood there as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold and purple, the mountains standing eternal guard over the land they had made their own. Inside, their children laughed and argued and lived, the future they had built together breath by breath, day by day, season by season. Thomas came out onto the porch, now 19 and nearly as tall as his father. Ma, Pa, Mary wants to know if we are having dessert tonight. Tell her yes, Miranda said, smiling. The apple pie she and I made this morning. And tell everyone to wash up, Adam added. Supper in 20 minutes. Thomas nodded and went back inside. Adam pulled Miranda closer, treasuring these quiet moments before the happy chaos of family dinner. I love you, he said, as he did every day, as he had since the night he found her shivering in a storm and brought her to warmth. I love you too, Miranda said, as she always did, as she always would. They had built something beautiful from that night of terror and cold, something strong and lasting. They had taken a chance on love on each other, and it had rewarded them beyond measure. 6 children, a thriving ranch, a partnership that had weathered 17 years of joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks, and emerged stronger each time. The years continued to pass in the rhythm they had established, seasons turning, children growing, love deepening. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet girl from town named Emma, and within a year, Miranda and Adam were grandparents to a squalling baby boy they named Adam Jr. Catherine married a fellow teacher she met in Denver, and they settled nearby, giving Miranda another daughter to love. Andrew fell for the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited girl who could outride most men, and their wedding was the social event of the season. Mary, the romantic of the family, fell in love with a young doctor who came west from Philadelphia, and her wedding brought tears to everyone's eyes. Even young Robert, when he turned 18, found a girl who could match his intellect, the daughter of Denver's leading attorney. As Miranda and Adam grew older, their hair threading with silver and lines deepening around their eyes, they watched their children build lives as full and happy as their own. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. The grandchildren multiplied, filling the house with noise and laughter during holidays and Sunday dinners. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Everyone came, all 6 children and their spouses, all 14 grandchildren, friends from town and neighboring ranches, even some of the original guests from their wedding. There was music and dancing and so much food the tables groaned under the weight. As the evening wore on and the younger grandchildren were carried to bed, Miranda and Adam slipped away to sit on their porch, watching the stars come out one by one. 25 years, Miranda marveled. Half my lifetime. The best half, Adam said, taking her hand. His hand was gnarled now with arthritis from years of hard work, but his grip was still strong, still sure. Do you remember that night? The storm? Every detail, Adam said. The rain, the cold, how small you looked curled up by that rock, how terrified I was that I had found you too late. You did not. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Adam corrected gently. You gave me purpose, Miranda. You gave me a reason to build something, to be more than just a cowboy drifting from job to job. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living. And you gave me healing, Miranda said. You helped me find joy again after I thought it was lost forever. You showed me that love could be simple and true, that happiness did not have to be complicated. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their family through the windows. Thomas was telling a story that had everyone laughing. Catherine was helping Mary settle a fussy toddler. Andrew was arm wrestling with his teenage sons. Robert was deep in conversation with his father-in-law about some political matter. We did good, Adam said softly. Look at them. We made all of that. We did do good, Miranda agreed. They stayed up late that night, long after the last guests had departed and the house had fallen quiet. They talked about everything and nothing, remembering, planning, dreaming. And when they finally went to bed, Adam held Miranda close, just as he had every night for 25 years, and she fell asleep to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The years continued their march. Adam turned 60, then 65, slowing down but refusing to stop working entirely. Miranda's hair went fully silver, and she traded her ranch work for gentler pursuits, teaching grandchildren to read and tending her flower gardens. They were content, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved fully. On a spring evening in 1910, 32 years after the storm, Adam and Miranda sat on their porch as the sun set. Adam had been feeling unwell lately, though he tried to hide it from Miranda. His breathing had become labored, and there was a grayness to his skin that worried her. She had finally convinced him to see the doctor in town, and the news had not been good. His heart was weakening, the doctor said. It could be months or years, but the end would come. I am not afraid, Adam said, knowing Miranda was thinking about the doctor's diagnosis. I have lived a good life. Better than I ever dreamed possible. "I am not ready," Miranda said, her voice breaking. "I cannot imagine my life without you." "You will go on," Adam said, pulling her close. "You are strong, Miranda, you always have been, and you will not be alone. Our children will take care of you and the grandchildren will keep you busy." "It will not be the same." "No," Adam agreed. "But you will be all right. You will remember and you will smile more than you cry because we had something worth remembering." "We did," Miranda said through her tears. "We had something beautiful." Adam lived another 18 months, long enough to see Thomas's youngest son take his first steps, long enough to dance with Miranda at Andrew's daughter's wedding, long enough to tell each of his children and grandchildren that he loved them. He passed peacefully on a cool October morning in 1911, with Miranda holding his hand and all 6 children gathered around his bed. The loss was devastating, but Miranda bore it with the strength Adam had always known she possessed. She mourned deeply, but did not break. She leaned on her children and found comfort in her grandchildren. She kept the gardens Adam had helped her plant and sat on the porch he had built, remembering. She lived another 12 years, long enough to see all of her grandchildren grown, long enough to hold her first great-grandchild, long enough to know that the legacy she and Adam had built would continue for generations. When she passed quietly in her sleep in 1923 at the age of 67, her children gathered to lay her to rest beside Adam in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. On her headstone, Thomas had inscribed simple words: Miranda Thorne Zimmerman, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Found in a storm, loved for a lifetime. And beside her, Adam's stone read, Adam Zimmerman, beloved husband, father, grandfather. He brought her to warmth and she gave him everything. The ranch continued for many years after, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story that had begun on a stormy night in 1878. The house was eventually modernized, then renovated, then preserved as a historical landmark. The original cabin where Miranda and Adam had started their married life was restored and opened to visitors, a testament to the strength and love that had built an empire from nothing.